Welcome to the Styleframe Saturdays podcast. I'm your host, Caroline Lee. Join me as I take a deep dive into the wonderful world of Styleframes and interview those who are industry wizards when it comes to this stage of the animated production process. For those who may not know, Styleframes are pieces of creative that are developed during the pre-production phase of an animation project, and they help creators and clients alike get an idea of the overall style of a piece. Sometimes the initial vision is carried through to the end, and other times it ends up on the cutting room floor. During this podcast, we'll discuss projects of all shapes and sizes, and the challenges, rewards, and lessons learned while developing what I like to call each guest's favorite frame. Before getting into the details of today's show, the Styleframe Saturdays team would like to give a quick shout out to Riverside and Anchor. They're the tools that we use to develop this podcast, and it simply wouldn't exist without them. Riverside has so many great features, but one of our favorites is its ability to both simultaneously and continuously upload tracks to the cloud as they're being recorded. We can't thank Riverside enough for making our podcasting experience effortless, so we've got an affiliate link in today's show notes for anyone who's interested in checking it out. We also wouldn't be able to get this podcast to you without the help from Anchor. Anchor allows us to seamlessly distribute this podcast to you on your favorite audio platforms like Spotify and Apple Podcasts. If anyone's interested in checking it out, head over to the link in today's show notes to learn more. So now that you know how we're getting this podcast to you, let's dive into episode 6. Today's guest is the first of hopefully many creative directors that we'll be chatting with here on the podcast. She's one of the co-founders of Cream Studio in Richmond, Virginia, and also one of this year's speakers at Camp MoGraph. Styleframes are an integral part to her creative process, so I'm stoked to see how her and her team utilize them in their projects. Please welcome Amanda Russell to the show. Hey Amanda, thank you so much for joining me on the show today. How have you been?
Very good. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Anytime. My pleasure. So I'd love to jump right into things if that's all right with you.
Yeah.
If for anyone who's unfamiliar with you, would you mind telling our audience a little bit about yourself and, what you've been up to lately?
Sure. Well, my name is Amanda Russell. I'm one of the co-founders and creative directors at Cream Studio. We're based in Richmond, Virginia, but we're a remote studio now officially, thanks to COVID, which has been a good thing for us. But we had a brick and mortar studio for 8 years, and then last year we decided to go fully remote. And we mainly focus on all things animation for marketing and advertising sectors. But we kind of dabble in entertainment and some other things as well. But you can check us out at wearecream.com.
Very cool.
Yeah.
And so before Cream, I'm sure you've talked about this a little bit on other podcasts and stuff that you've been on. But before you founded Cream with your with your team, what were you doing prior to Cream? Were you staff or freelance anywhere? How did you exactly fall into motion design?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's unlike the industry today. Back in my day, I'm a little bit older than you are. I won't tell you exactly how old, but it was a little bit different back then. And so I went to school for graphic design, and I, as a kid, always loved art. That was probably the only reason I graduated high school is because I went to AP art classes, and that was the only thing kind of inspired me to go to school every day. And so I really got into kind of freelancing at an early age, like even in high school, creating logos and brochures and all kinds of things like that. But I didn't know what path that would really lead me to. And then I moved to Michigan and ended up going to school there for a little bit, and graduated just with print. Like that was kind of what I was thinking, because that's what I was comfortable with. And over the years of freelancing, I did kind of get a little bored of it, and ended up going into like the broadcast world. Hated it. Like broadcast news, where everybody seems to start out. Yeah,
exactly.
Lots of headshots, lots of, stingers and things like that. And I worked the midnight shift, and because of that, I was able to do a lot of the tutorials, the online tutorials, which was really the kind of schooling you would get for like motion graphics at the time. That was really it. A lot of Andrew Kramer, a lot of just Adobe, like how to use After Effects. And I picked it up really fast. And within a couple of months, they promoted me to the day shift, which was a big deal, you know, for my health, I'm sure. Um, and so, yeah, so I just really got into it. And then, I don't know, maybe like a year after working there, maybe a year or two, um, I wanted to work at a studio. And so I got hired at a small production studio here in Richmond. Actually, it's a bigger one that's been around for like 40 years. But they were looking for an animator slash editor. And even though I wasn't an editor, I was like, yeah, I can do that. How hard could that be? It's hard. It's hard. But that's where I worked for a couple of years and then started freelancing because actually my husband was in the Navy and he went on deployment for 8 months, and I needed a project that would keep me sane so that I wouldn't cry all the time. So, you know, I had a little baby, my daughter Bella, and I think having a creative project is a coping mechanism for me. I have to have one all the time. And
Totally.
so at night, when my daughter would be sleeping, I could be working on something, and it was very creatively fulfilling to just work on these animations. And I freelanced with Epifio for a long time, and they're based out
Very
in
cool.
Cincinnati. Yeah. And over time, I just realized, well, this is kind of like the stuff I want to be doing, because like the local commercial stuff, it wasn't really my thing. But full animations, man, that sounded really cool to me. I could have so much creative control, and I could just explore and experiment in all of these different types of executions. And so my friend and former coworker, Ruth Newberry, and I say former only because we had worked together before at the at MGFX, which was the broadcast news station. We decided to go freelance together. And so we had a little gig called Flux Creative, which later we found out that flux means diarrhea. So we're really glad that we didn't name cream that. But yeah, that was a fun surprise, as diarrhea usually is. I hope I'm the first and only person to say diarrhea on your podcast.
Hey, you know, you never know what's going to happen, right? You know,
It's
you might be the first of many. We don't know.
okay. We're just mixing it up here. So yeah, so then after a few months of doing that, I mean, we were getting a lot of work, really. And so we met with another freelancer, Dave Swain, who's in the area, and he had just a huge body of work, and everybody respected him in the area. And so we were like, we got to meet this guy. You know, who is this guy? He was so mysterious. And we met him, and we're like, you're awesome. We just hit it off so quickly, just as friends, as people. And we really respected each other's work. So like within just a ridiculous amount of time, maybe like a month or two of knowing each other, we decided, yeah, we're going to open up a real studio together, which I don't
That's
recommend
awesome.
because, you know, you don't know, you don't really know somebody at that point, but it
True.
worked out very well for us. So here we are.
Very
Yeah.
cool. Very cool. And so, and that was, what year was that when you guys officially, the three of you, formed Cream?
2013. Yep.
Okay, wow. So
Mm-hmm.
almost 10 years
I
now.
know, it's crazy. Yeah.
That's awesome. Well, and I feel like, you know, correct me if I'm wrong, over the past 10 years too, I feel like motion design, the industry itself has changed so much too. So like, were the projects that you were working on initially when you formed Cream, are they about the same
No,
as they are now, or are they
totally
like
different.
vastly different?
Yeah.
Very, oh, that's interesting to hear too.
Yeah,
Yeah.
totally different. I mean, well, I mean, it's certainly different in terms of style and complexity. Even in the way that we work, it's totally different. When we started, we were all kind of functioning as freelancers, individual freelancers under one roof. We shared
Sure.
the profits, you know, because we were all equal owners and everything, but we didn't even have a producer. So we didn't even know what that would feel like to have a producer. We were scared to hire our first producer because we didn't think she would have enough work. And it's just a ridiculous thought now, looking back. But we did a lot of explainers, like 2D explainers. They
Mm-hmm.
were terrible. It was really bad. But yeah, and then now we kind of do a lot of different types of styles, and that has a lot to do with our structure. But we stay pretty close in our lane with um, who we work with, the types of clients that we work with, and the the industries that we work with. So it's the purpose of the video. The purpose of the videos are 90% of the time are for marketing and advertising.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they could be for like internal uses. Um, but most of the time it's some sort of promotion to get people excited about a product or a service, from our clients. Yeah.
For sure,
Hmm.
sure. And was that something that you were thinking about early on when you guys had sort of formed Cream together, where you sort of like, we want to make sure we can take on all different kinds of styles? Or did you have in mind initially, and maybe it's changed since then, that you were like, you know, we love this particular style and we want to be maybe known for this certain aesthetic?
No, not even a little bit. I think I think because there are three owners with three different backgrounds and different interests,
True.
we really liked to dabble in different things, and not even just one thing for each person. It's like a lot of things. Like for me, for example, I really got into stop motion for a little while, and when we had a studio, and but 2D was kind of my bread and butter. And I did some character stuff, and lots of motion graphics, but I also had a background in 3D too, briefly. But I could still kind of get in there and work under it. And for Ruth, it's completely different, and for Dave, it's completely different. And so we just have a lot of interests. Some of them are shared, but we like that. That's why we like coming to work, because you don't know what that project can be. And it's exciting to change with the times, and not just be constricted to, well, that's our style, so we have to do it like
Right.
that. Instead, when we get a brief or an RFP or something from a client, we try to figure out, what do we want this to look like, or what's the best solution, and what's possible with the budget or with the timeline or whatever. Because
Right.
all of those factors really matter when it comes to making something great. You have to problem solve, and use all of those things, for consideration.
For sure, for sure. And would you say that, so correct me if I'm wrong, you guys are a remote operation of about 10
No,
people,
well,
right?
it's fuzzy, because
I know you use freelancers,
uh
but I like full time. How many
it's
people
it's
is it
it's still
that?
fuzzy. But
Oh, okay.
we have, and it's not as if I have no idea. It's just there are
Hmm.
three owners, but we're all three of us are creative directors and leads, with
Right.
animation backgrounds and all that. And then we have our two producers, our senior producer and our producer Emily, and Hannah, who are amazing. And then we have, our amazing, incredible, 100%, like, want to hug him every time I get on a call with him, Nick. He's our 3D artist, and he lives in Santiago, Chile. And so
Very
he's
cool.
pretty far away. But then we have our marketing director and our sales director, and so we have like this team. As far as having staff animators and illustrators, I think we want to get there. But what has held us back is finding the right person who kind of fits right in. And that's
Hmm.
super important to us because we are so small, but also someone who's um, diverse enough in their skill set to tackle a lot of different things, because that's kind of our MO. That's what we want to do. But we're very open to it. But right now, our structure has kind of always been, um, we're going to hand select teams, for every project. So whenever we get an idea, we're like, oh, who would be great for this is this person. And then who could animate this section is this person, or, whatever. And that's exciting to us. And most of those people, they want to stay freelance, and we're okay with that because,
Right.
we want them to be happy.
For sure.
And I think up until COVID hit, we kind of always thought, well, we'd have to have somebody who would want to move to Richmond, like wah wah, which is like, no,
Richmond's a
no, it
great city.
is.
What are you talking about?
No, it's great, but I just think that there's, at least before COVID, there was an impression of, well, why would I, like I want to go to New York, I want to go to LA, but now everybody is just
Right.
working remotely. So we're very
Mm-hmm.
open to having artists, illustrators who, and animators who want a full-time gig to work with us. So yeah, I mean, like, hey, if you're out there, come see us.
Hit up Cream.
Yeah. I'm gonna get like a million emails now.
Well, and you answered another follow-up question I was going to ask after that, a lead up from this other question that I asked too, that, it sounds like, you guys, are bringing on people who have like a diverse set of skill sets, specialists, I'm sure, for certain projects like you were alluding to, but, maybe generalist type of background, someone who can kind of like dip their hands into different parts of the production process, or just like dip on different styles of projects too. So that's really cool and interesting to hear as well.
Yeah, and I think just someone who has that kind of shared interest of like, someone who can mimic a style, not copy, but someone who can say, I'm inspired by this. I want to try this out. I want to try to get in this world a little bit. And then, maybe a few months later, they want to try something else out. Someone who likes to kind of explore their skill set. I think that that's something that is really it's really inspiring to us, and so I think that's a really great thing to have.
For sure. No, I couldn't agree more. Well, you talked a little bit about how, when you first got into this, you're doing, or you were inspired by a decent amount of stop motion stuff. So I'd love to jump into the main event of the show, if that's cool with you, and talk about the frame that you're going to be sharing with us today.
Sure. Yes. So I've got notes because I need notes. I'm a note person. All right. So I want to talk a little bit about it. Okay. So the frame that I am sharing is, it's from a spot called Wallets, and it was for Virginia Credit Union, and it came to us through an agency, Elevation, called Elevation here in Richmond. And it was actually part of a pitch that we won.
Oh, cool.
A few years back. It was actually probably like a lot of years back now that I think about it. But the reason why I chose it, not because it's the newest or flashiest, I think because it's the most meaningful. There was a transition that happened for me where I was like, I think I really like this stop motion thing. And it's a certain kind of stop motion, no character stuff. That's way beyond my pay grade. But it just feels so tactile, and it's animating, but it's right in front of you, and you have to rely on your hands and the shakiness of them, or the steadiness of them, depending on how much coffee you had. And you have to rely on your team a lot because you can't just do it by yourself a lot of the times. So this frame is specific to this artist shot, I'll say, artist scene. And it represents the wallet, or the life and the personality of a creative person. And so I'll just give you a little bit of a background of like what this, I'll start with the RFP. So the client originally came to us, and they had the script written, but they had a lower budget. They wanted to do production, and so they sent the RFP out to a bunch of different production studios. We were kind of green at the time, and we didn't even know why they sent it to us, because we don't really do production. So we got it. And our first instinct was like, well, we can't do this. We'll just, tell them we can't participate. But then once we really read the script, we're like, wow, this is really good. Like, what can we do? And how can we make this work? So we came up with the idea of stop motion, and the whole idea behind um, the messaging for this spot is that Virginia Credit Union, their whole selling point is that they treat their customers like people, and they look beyond the financial aspects of their customers. They don't look at their bank account, to determine how nice they're going to be to a customer. They just get to know each person, their family, and they will get to know you by name. And that was really inspiring to us, because this idea of having a wallet that's different for every person that walks through the door, not necessarily what's inside, the money that's inside, but the things around it that kind of support who this person is. That was really, really cool to us. Um, so yeah, that was our idea. We actually put together a little, I guess you'd call it like a rip-o-matic.
Mm-hmm.
And threw that together with some music, and the music is actually, I think, what we ended up using in the final.
Oh, nice.
With Dave Swain's, my business partner, with his voiceover, because he's actually a national voiceover artist for.
No way.
Gosh, yeah, I literally every time it's not Jimmy John's, it's Jersey Mike's. So if you ever hear a Jersey Mike's spot, that is our co-founder, Dave Swain. That's his voice.
Even to
And
this
he's been doing
day?
it for years. Yeah.
No
I mean,
way.
he's been doing it for years. Yeah. So actually a lot of our work, or some of it, I'll say, is his voice, because he'll do the scratch track, and then there's demo love, like, oh, it's so good. And so we end up keeping it.
That's so funny.
Yeah. So this one, you'll hear his voice on there as well. But
very cool.
Yeah. So anyway, once we won the pitch, we had to get right to work, and there was so much that we had to learn on this one, because we we're green to stop motion. Like, we had done a few tests and a few smaller projects before, but nothing where there was multiple objects and multiple scenes, or I would say like complex scenes like this, where we had to animate all of the items in the scene. That was new to us. But we worked with the client pretty closely on the objects, and just making sure that everything was right for each scene. And it really kind of runs the gamut. There's a lot of different scenes throughout. So if you get a chance, I would recommend looking at the full spot, because there's the artist, but there's also a child's wallet, and like what that looks like. And there's little goldfish and like a nickel that come out of his wallet. And then there's a mom and a grandmother and, a student. So there's all of these different personalities that are represented in each scene. And it was just a lot of fun to tell that story without people, with just objects, and to try to get an emotional response from the viewers with those objects. That was the challenge. So it was really exciting to us.
That's so cool. And so, because this is a style frame too, I mean, well, correct me if I'm wrong. You said that, you guys don't do a whole lot of production stuff. So for this stop motion piece, was it all production, part production, some, like graphical, animation stuff? How
That's a
did
great
the
question.
process work for this?
It's 99% production.
Okay.
And so we knew how, we have lights, and we had we shot this in the basement of our studio. But I guess we don't do a whole lot of live action shoots. That's what I was thinking, like larger productions
Right.
like that. But yeah, we did include a few, or at least I should say, we had to fix a few things that weren't animating properly. or we couldn't get them to do exactly what we needed them to do on the shoot. But they are, I think it's like two small little things. One of them is there's like a college students thing. And looking back, I can clearly see it's definitely not stop motion. Like I'm like, oh, that doesn't look great. And then the other one is like a little bow on a wallet that's kind of, like rotating like this. I think we added that in because it needed, that scene in particular needed a focus for the eye. So that's what we chose to do.
Very cool. So what
Yeah.
was because this was a live action sort of like production type of thing, what was the Styleframe process like? Because I'm sure you're just sort of trying to find the key moments for this video to sort of present, well, I guess back to the agency, maybe to then the client, or were you, presenting directly to the client, these frames?
No, we were presenting to the agency. And that the reason why I wanted to pick this one is because the Styleframe process for this one was completely different than probably anything that you guys have talked about.
I'm sure.
And completely different from anything that we have done before, because we didn't really know what we were doing. So we were just kind of like, I think this is what we're supposed to do. And at the time, we didn't really have a really firm creative process for this type of project. So we started out by saying, here are the inspiration pieces that we have. And those inspiration pieces, one of them was the HGTV piece by Buck. I think it's called, hold on, what is that called? In case anybody wants to look it up. Global Spice. So we started there, which would kind of serve as, well, just inspiration, but like a guide to kind of help the agency and the client understand where we were going with this and the general aesthetic of what we wanted to drive towards. And so what we liked about this piece is that, and it's kind of dated in the way that like there's a lot of things going on at the time with this sort of like overhead organized or knolled objects aesthetic. And everything is really clean, and sometimes things would be like monochromatic and a mixture of like paper and like all this other stuff. But we didn't go the paper route for this one. We decided to go with those real, found objects or purchase objects. So we began there, and then we showed them another, like a full mood board with a lot of stills, and they liked the overall idea, but they were a little bit hesitant about going too organized because it felt really sterile and unnatural, and that kind of was misaligned with the message, the script, which is like, we're all about you, and we're real humans just like you. So we had to take a step back, because I think right away we were like, well, wait a minute, you don't like our idea? You're like, what are we going to do now? But they were completely right. They were totally right. And so once we took that step back and we decided, okay, we're going to go with a blend of these two ideas. The general look and organization is not going to be like super natural and casual as if you're just looking at somebody's house. But it won't be so organized and clean and neat that it's distracting, you know? So that's where we started. And then from there, we worked really closely with the agency to start buying all of these specific objects, and then buying just a litany of other objects that support those that message or that emotion in each scene. So I mean, even from like the backgrounds, like the carpets, the tile, everything that you're seeing like was a deliberate choice. We probably mulled over them many times. So then from there, once we had all of those objects and once we had all of those scenes, we did some like tests, some photography tests where we pulled in the entire agency, the team at the agency, and then whoever was working on it from our end. And then we would just set things into the scene. And, we would look at the monitor and go, okay, well, how does that look? How does that look? And just test different layouts out. And that was very new to us. It was actually like really terrifying because you're there with the client. Like they're
Right.
right there. They're watching you. It's very limited in terms of time.
Mm-hmm.
And so, you have to be creative on the spot. And if they don't like it, they're going to tell you. They're gonna be like, no, fix it. And so, but their team was very collaborative and creative as well. So they were able to get in and say, well, what about this and what about this? So we landed on having, however many sets, like here's a general idea of how we'd like this to be. And so we'd take a photo of that and a photo of this. And then that was our blueprint for the animatic and the shoot and everything else.
Very cool. Very
Yeah,
cool.
it's a very different process. And I don't even know if that's how we would do it again. Probably not. But it worked for that time.
And how long, you had said, it's a pretty involved process, obviously, from then just like sort of I don't want to say typical because I know every project, has its own, gems and, things that you run into along the way too. But,
hmm
it sounds like a very involved process, doing a stop motion piece.
hmm
So, and then having the client right there with you, I'm sure that adds to the timeline as well. How long, from start to finish, did it take to not only just do the style frame portion, but like finish this whole
Oh,
project altogether? Like, did they say, we have a hard deadline of here that our client
yeah.
needs it by this date, or, how did that
Oh,
really work?
yeah. I don't know the specifics. I don't remember the specifics, but I know that it was pretty ambitious. I want to say like maybe 3 to 4 weeks
Oh, wow.
from start to finish. I might be lying a little bit, but it was somewhere in there.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I remember being panicked the majority of the time of this thing. And as far as shooting goes, we only had 2 days to shoot. And with all of these
Wow.
sets, it's not like the animation is overly complex. It's just that the client was there, and then they had their client who was watching us as well because they could see the live feed from the the monitors, so they would see like every time we would shoot a scene, we would replay it back for them, and they would either approve it or not approve it. And so, yeah, that was really scary at times because I'm like, we're gonna run out of time, which means you run out of money. That's really it. You've got 2 days in the budget, and so what do you do
Wow.
after that? So it really got to where we were sweating it a little bit, but at the same time, I enjoyed it because it really pushed us. I love being pushed. It's scary. It always is. I still get scared. I'm currently scared right now in a lot of my projects but that's how you're pushing yourself.
Right.
You're growing when you do that. And so, yeah, for those reasons, I really did enjoy it.
And ever since this project, then have you, I haven't looked super recently, but are you trying to do more stop motion ever since this project? Or because I know you guys do 2D, 3D, and those types of things as well.
Yeah.
So just curious, if this was a piece that caught other people's eyes and were like, well, we want to do a stop motion piece with you guys now too.
Yeah. Well, we have done we did one for breast cancer awareness. We did one for kangaroo. Actually, a series of stop motion pieces for kangaroo. And I think some other ones. I'm blanking right now. But without a studio now, it's going to be like much harder. Um,
True.
and I think that production to rent something out and to get everybody there with COVID restrictions, it's kind of like, is it really worth it? Beyond that, I mean, I would like to do more, but it's expensive to shoot anything right now. And for whatever reason, stop motion, I think because it's kind of lo-fi, like it's not super smooth. There's a reputation, or there is an idea out there that it should be cheaper than like other types of animation or other types of production. And that is just not the case. If anything, it takes
Right.
way longer to do these
Right.
things because you not only have the shoot, but you have all the posts as well. There's a lot of
Right.
posts that goes into it. Um, and so I don't think that we're like actively searching for more stop motion pieces, but I think that we're definitely open to that solution if the right project comes up. I don't think we would ever go, no, we shouldn't do stop motion because, this or that. I think it would be if it's the right solution and it matches the budget and it matches the schedule, then let's give it a try.
For sure. For
Yeah.
sure. Um, well, I know you had said, you were working on this piece, prior to being a remote operation and everything. But uh, in your opinion, were there any challenges and or rewards that you experienced while working on this project, or, what were they that you can remember that, come to mind right now?
Oh, so many. Well, this was a project that I don't know. I just felt the weight of the world on it because I was the lead. And by the way, I should say I'm not taking credit for this whole thing. Like this was not just me. This was very collaborative between like us and the client and our team. Like Ruth Newberry worked. Everybody worked on something. But I just happened to be the lead on this, and so I want to talk about it. But um, yeah, I I think I learned a lot about leading. I learned a lot about having the confidence to lead and trying to display that confidence to a client, which I don't think I did very well in this one. Um, I became I love the client and I love the outcome of this, but the way that I handled everything, I think I said yes too much. And so that was a big takeaway for me. Like I need to, when I make a suggestion and then I get pushback on it, I want to make sure that I push again. Like I don't want to be steamrolled as often. And so I learned a little bit on that one. So that's a big positive for me. I like being able to measure that growth. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and then in terms of like learning like actual technical skills, we learned so much about Dragonframe, which I'm sure I didn't retain any of that stuff, but we got so efficient during that process. Like we were just like this well-oiled machine between Ruth and I because she was at the computer or at the station, like sitting there, but she was watching me because I would be animating. So everything, the camera's up here, and I'm like here, and I'm literally like doot doot doot, or you've got like all of these things that you're animating, and she'd be looking at the onion skin of the animatic over top of the live feed, and she would be like directing me in a lot of ways. And then it was just such great communication between the two of us that I was just like, man, I love this girl, she's so great. It was awesome that when stuff like that happens, you're just like, man, I really value my team. Like that was one of those moments. So
Absolutely.
there was really great collaboration that happened but between us in that one. And so, yeah, but there's probably a lot of things I would change if I could. But, that's just how life is.
Of course,
Yeah.
of course. Well, yeah, and you're definitely not the first, person on the show to say like, I learned so much on this job because, it was something that I hadn't done before, or, you know, we didn't know much going into it kind of thing.
Hmm.
And I feel like that's where a lot of learning experiences come from. And I know several other guests have said this too, but that, there really isn't a cookie cutter or formula to any project,
Hmm.
and that goes for, school, when you're a student, and then obviously now as like a professional in the industry as well, you really just, you learn constantly.
Yeah.
And I, not that I think anyone takes that for granted, but I think, every project, like, we come to the table with our skill sets, but we're also coming to the table not knowing how to do stuff too. And I think that that's actually kind of like a good thing as well, because you're going to acquire
Mm-hmm.
new skill sets along the way too.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point because when we first started, we were always comparing notes to each other because there weren't a lot of studios that we could like feel comfortable reaching out to. Like, hey, how do you guys do this? You know, like that's it would be weird, right? Nowadays it's totally different because we have like friends that also own studios, and so we might compare notes and be like, oh, okay, it's a lot more collaborative these days. But we were pretty isolated when we first started, and so we would take our own experiences between me, Dave, and Ruth, and go like, well, how do you do boards and how do you do these things? That was like how we first started, and then over time we realized, all right, well, there is somewhat of a formula here. Let's get that down into like a formal creative process. But you're right. No matter what process you develop, um, unless you're just doing the same thing over and over and over and over again, you really need to have your problem solving skills ready to go because
Yes.
some projects require a mood board, some projects don't. Some projects require an animatic, and some don't. I mean, there's so many different things where you don't think you need it, or you do think you need, whatever it is, and it could be completely unnecessary to even add that phase in, or crucial to the project. So you have
Right.
to just kind of pick and choose as you go, or at least in the planning of the project.
For sure, for sure. And actually, now that you mentioned that, that does bring a question to mind too. So you put together style frames for this piece. Were there any storyboards behind it, or based on project timelines and any constraints that you were dealing with? Did you have time to do that, or the agency was
Storyboards.
sort of like, we don't need that. Let's just jump right into style
Yeah.
frames. Like, how did that go?
So I mean, even the style frames were very loose, because I think we were waiting on final. The style frame that I showed you, that is actually from the final, so I kind of cheated a little bit. But the original style frames were just kind of like tests of what these
Right.
objects could look like. Um, so we didn't have. I mean, we had storyboards. I don't think they were very successful because we didn't do a very good job of at the time of telling the client like what this process is, because we didn't really know the process. It was kind of like this guessing game.
Right.
And I will say things changed a lot in that project that were completely outside of our control. So when we thought we would have a process, we had to change something up really quickly, and well, now we're not doing this anymore. We have to do this. So it was one of those things where style frames, or I'm sorry, storyboards were not super helpful. The animatic was the most informative thing, and just the most helpful
Gotcha.
thing for this kind of project, because what we did was we went into After Effects. We had the overhead like test shots of what these objects were and where they would be, like the placement of them. And we went into After Effects. We just kind of like traced all of those objects, and made them into different colors. And then we used that as an onion skin to give us a guide as to like, okay, well, this is going to come in here and this is going to move like this. And that way it prevented not only us from like going off the rails and just adding a bunch of stuff that shouldn't go in there, but it prevented the client from possibly changing things up. We got those animatics approved. Like, well, this is exactly how it's going to move and all that stuff. And once that's approved, well, then you can't go backwards. They did go backwards. Yeah, like on set. Can we do this instead? So yeah, I mean, but the animatic for us was like a godsend because it was like the thing that really tied us to what the thing was going to look like at the end of the day.
For sure, for sure. And one last question for you on this too. When we were emailing about this frame, you had mentioned that like this is a frame that you hold like pretty near and dear
Mm-hmm.
to your heart. So I was just curious to know, why that is, why, of
Yeah.
all the projects that you guys have worked on as a studio, why this one continues to be top of mind for you.
I think that it was like when you, I don't want to make it sound like it was like a traumatic experience, but it was very
Oh, no,
stressful.
no, not
Yeah,
at
there was
all.
like a stressful element to it for sure. And that tends, when there's stress, tends to bring people together. The deadline was, like I said, really aggressive. The budget just wasn't there. But I got to work with my best friends on something that in the end it was beautiful. And I loved the script. It was just so well written, and that meant a lot to me. Um, I love animation that makes you feel something. It's especially if it's possible to do that in marketing, where you're being authentic. You're not BSing someone. You're saying who you are, what your company does, and you're getting an emotional response out of it because of the creative execution and the words that were put down in the script. And so those types of projects to me, there's something about them that just feel very special. And I loved animating a lot of this. There were times where I didn't love animating it, but where I
Of
would like
course,
start
there's
shaking.
always
I'm
those
like,
times.
oh, okay. Um, but yeah, just all of the objects and the stories within each scene, it just feels like a playground to me. I get inspired by that stuff. And yeah, it was just fun because of all of those reasons.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Well, I mean, this has been such a cool project to talk about with you. You're definitely the first to talk about a stop motion piece with that. So I'm very, very curious to, see what people have to say about it. I know everyone's going to love it, when this comes out. I know I'm loving it right now.
They're gonna tell me
But
how
yeah,
how wrong my process was. That's what they're gonna say. You should have done this.
I mean, I'll be honest. I've never worked on a stop motion piece, for a
Mhm.
client, or working, through an agency kind of thing either. So, learning about even some of the tools that you guys were using, I'm definitely going, on the internet after this and checking those out because I don't even
Yeah.
know what they are, but they sound really cool.
Yeah, they are.
But I've really enjoyed learning about, this piece, your background in animation and motion design, how you got into the industry and stuff like that. If people want to connect with you and learn more about what you're working on, including Cream, what's the best way for them to do so?
Well, you can reach out to me at Amanda at wearecream.com. You can visit our website at wearecream.com, or you can come see me at Camp Mograph. I'm one of the speakers there in September here in Virginia Beach. So come say hi.
That's awesome. And for anyone, who's on social media, what's the best way for them to reach out to you or Cream in that regard too?
Oh, I'm always on LinkedIn, and Instagram. I have a lot of like family stuff on there, so it's probably not like the coolest place for you to check us out, but you can check us out at We Are Cream Studio on Instagram and I mean, Vimeo. We're on all of the sites, but We Are Cream Studio or We Are Cream RVA. Those are the two handles that we use.
Very cool. Well, thank you so much, again, Amanda. This has been such a real treat, speaking with you, learning about, this project and everything that you guys have been working on. We'll be sharing links to some of the tools and resources we mentioned here for our audience to check out, including, the studios and other
Yeah.
stuff as well. But that wraps it up for today, everyone. Feel free to email us at styleframesatpod@gmail.com. We'd love to hear what you think of the show. And if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions, if you like what you see and hear here, don't forget to subscribe, share, and review the show on your favorite podcasting platforms as well. Lastly, come connect with us on social. We're on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, and LinkedIn. Thank you all for tuning in. Thank you again, Amanda, and we'll see you guys in the next one.